Good morning and welcome to Sunday Soul Day, weekly fuel for your mind, body, and soul. Hi, Joe.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Allie.
Hi, good morning, Demisha. Good morning, Joe.
Well, I'm thrilled to have Joe on today. Joe Spectre is a retired firefighter and host of the podcast, The Grit, Growth, and Gratitude. I am just cannot wait for you guys to talk to him. I actually came across Joe's social media. He was doing a post on, I can't remember the topic, but it just pulled me in and I could feel the energy through the post. And so I reached out to him and, you never know if people are going to respond. He responded right away. And it led to such a beautiful conversation just via DM. And then from there, we ended up connecting over a quick Zoom chat, and we have been chatting ever since. So I couldn't wait to get him onto the show. His story is so full of so many just incredible things, and can't wait for you guys to hear a little bit more about his journey. Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, Joe.
I'm so thankful to be here. And you're right, we have had a beautiful connection and beautiful conversations. And so thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love for the audience just to learn a little bit more about you. So let's just kick it off with starting like, where did you grow up? Tell us about your earlier life a little bit, and then we'll kind of dive into some more things later.
Okay, that sounds good. So I grew up in the 80s and the 90s in Central Phoenix in an urban neighborhood as a totally latchkey kid. And I wouldn't say I had a very, like, it wasn't super aggressive or abusive growing up, but it was pretty much like raising myself as far as stumbling through the mayhem of like kind of a rough urban neighborhood and coming up. So again, typical 80s latchkey kid, kind of um, developed my own, nurturing and emotional connection and all that stuff later in life because I wasn't really given that. But I had a high drive, so I just ran 100 miles an hour, and I had good friends and good support, in the city who helped me out. And I was always kind of the outlier in that I had a lot of friends kind of where I came from. You either did really well or, you drifted into, I have a lot of PhD friends and a lot of friends who have been to prison. It's a real weird, eclectic mix. And, I decided, I kind of wanted to get out, and I hustled through school. I went up to NAU, which is a college in Northern Arizona, got my bachelor's degree in 2.5 years at 20 years old because I desperately wanted to be a police officer by the time I turned 21. That was just a goal. I was very goal oriented, a little like perfectionist, kind of driven type of person. And I had done a ride along with a police officer. I don't even remember why, an internship program for college. And it was like crazy. There was like a foot chase and lights and sirens. And I was like, this is awesome. I want this. And so I got a degree in psychology and criminal justice, got hired by the police department right when I was 21. Um, I was a police officer for 4 years, and I learned more about myself in that experience than, I mean, lifetimes and lifetimes of wisdom as far as empathy and seeing people at their worst. What am I made of in conflict and confrontation? A lot of childhood fears, being like a little guy and having to like face off with criminals and all that stuff. It was very good for me to learn conflict resolution, assertive communication, team building, all of these amazing things, what my values were. I went from being like 20 years old and living at home to 21, like on the streets dealing with mayhem. And that was beautiful. But I also learned that while I was glad to have conflict ability, the ability to be assertive, the ability to be direct, the ability to fight, I think I wanted to prove that. I didn't dig it, and it didn't feel like home. And every time I would stop at the fire station to use the restroom or something, these guys were like just playing ping pong together, and it was like so fun. It was like same type of job, but opposite environment and character traits. And when I would see them on calls, I would have to arrest somebody, and I'm like deeply empathetic. So I would go and I'm peeling back the layers like, yes, this person did this. But then as I'm driving to jail, I'm talking to him and he's telling me about his childhood. And it's just like my heart is broken for everybody involved over and over again. Or I'm arresting some guy because I'm just doing my job and he hit his wife or something and he's kicking me and spitting on me. And these firemen are going and like handing out stickers to the kids, save the guy with a heart attack. Everybody says thank you. And I'm like, this is where I need to be. And the firefighters are like, yes, this is where you need to be. We love hanging out with you on scene and stuff. What are you doing over there? So after 4 years on the police department, I put my driving gear, got all my fire science stuff, used my networking, stayed within the same public safety system, but made my way to the fire department at 25, I think. And that was home. That was where I really put my roots down.
Oh my goodness. I love your transition. And I am like you, Joe. I have friends with PhDs and also friends who've been to prison and even dated people who have been in prison, because I really don't judge people on their past. And so I really look at the person that they are, today. And so I love that you touched on that. And, going from a transition, like being a police officer and really, in both jobs, you're risking your life, so you have been of service, for many years. So I love that you kind of shared that, and grateful that you went over to being a fireman, because I definitely see that in you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joe. I love that you are aware that being of service is your purpose and that you were able to find a way to be of service that worked best for you. Because not everyone is able to, they just, oh, I have to be of service, I'm going to do this thing. You were able to pivot. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. And I don't know how much of that, like I've really done a lot over the last couple of years to kind of deconstruct my why and what is really what I want to do versus what I was conditioned to do and things of that nature. And I've kind of shed the people pleasing. I'm really big on keeping my own cup full. The first person I love and serve is me. And I don't think that's selfish. It's like on the fire truck in the morning, we had to check our gear off in our oxygen tank, because if we go fight a fire and we run out of air and now we become part of the problem, that's not acceptable. We had to be fit on the job. So I really have shifted a lot of the things I learned from the fire service in regards to that to like self-love and self-care. But the more I fill up my cup, the more I can pour out to others. And it's not a validation thing. I thrive on serving and helping others. It's almost even where it's selfish. It makes me feel good, but I have to do it in a way, because I was real controlled and directed as a kid when I was parented and stuff. I have to do it in a way that feels organic and good to me, not where somebody's saying, I need this from you and pulling me somewhere, but where I'm like, this is where I thrive and I can help,
Yeah. And it's not being selfish, it's being self-full. Like
There you
Denisha and
go.
I like to say that the most loving thing we can do for others is to fuel ourselves up first.
I
So
love that. Self-full. Is that how you worded that?
self-full. Yeah.
I'm going to take that from you if that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Denisha, can he have it?
Yes.
Yes, you can take it. Yeah, we did a podcast and talked about that. And I love using that because I've been called selfish, and from people I dated, from family members sometimes. And I'm like, look, I can't serve anybody or do anything if I'm not taking care of myself. If I'm low, then I'm pouring from a very low space. You're not going to get the best of me. So I
Exactly.
call it being self-full and
Yeah.
filling yourself up. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great reframe. So Joe, can you share your personal journey from being a firefighter to becoming a podcaster, author, meditation teacher, and what inspired this transformation in your life?
I can. I have to tell you, no matter how efficient I am with my words, it takes a little bit of time because it's kind of a long story with a lot of mayhem. And I also have to offer, I don't know if a trigger warning is the appropriate way to put it, but there was a lot of mental health struggles and some depths and despair and a lot of death and some suicidal ideations and things of that nature to get there. Is that appropriate to speak on here?
This is exactly the place to speak about our mental health struggles. We want to get it out there, that we are all more alike than different, and getting our voice out there helps us to connect to others who are still suffering. So please.
Okay, that is the exact same mission I'm on as well. Okay, so in 2017, I had about 15 years in public safety. And I had just worked very hard for 2 years on a captain's promotional exam. It was very competitive. And there was a captain who was retiring ahead of me in 3 months. So she was on vacation the whole time until she retired. So I was in her spot. I had my own fire truck, my own fire crew. I was running command. It was the first time in my career where like I was a supervisor and I'd worked so hard for this. I had dialed in all my leadership. I just like very influential financially. It was the most money I'd been making. It was the job. It was my dream job. To be a fire captain is ridiculous. To lead your brothers and sisters into burning buildings and to help people and then to cook afterwards, and to like, I love leading. I love it so much, especially like in that particular case, because I lead from the heart, and I'm not a power over others people. So it was fostering a fun environment. It was just great. And my daughter was 5, my son was 4, my marriage was great. Um, and kind of I was just literally living the dream. Everything was awesome. And then I hit about a year and a half where my life just got flipped upside down so rapidly and so jarringly. And I lost multiple loved ones in a row. It started with both of my dogs getting a cancer diagnosis within 2 weeks of each other. And my dogs are my people. I mean, they're my babies, and it's my pack.
Mhm.
And then my mom had dementia and started getting so bad that she started no longer recognizing my kids and I. When one of my dogs finally passed away, my grandmother died the same week. So I was like trying to write my eulogy for my grandmother. My dog's not at my feet, and I've never grieved. And like I said, I kind of raised myself in this regard. So I didn't even know what the word grief was, let alone how to process what I was feeling. And being a big feeler, I've always drifted towards big feelings like empathy and joy. It's natural for me to be bubbly. I was not used to the other end of the spectrum, which is like, I learned when you have that intense joy, you got intense pain too. And when you love hard and you lose loved ones, it hurts. And I had never had my heart broken. And so while all of that was going on, I had an injury on the job, and it was kind of a weird situation. So when I was in the police department, I got into a really bad car accident, cracked the window with my head. The accident wasn't my fault. I had a brain injury. I bulged some discs in my neck. I started having a neurological condition, which caused like my eyes to spasm. It's from the brain injury. It's called dystonia.
Yeah.
But I was functional for 10 years after that. I had to get Botox injections from the neurologist, which stops the eyes from spasming. I had some injections in my neck and physical therapy. Well, I was on a call when in 2017, when I was telling you, when everything in my life was just like perfect and I'm like living the dream. And it's a very minor call. It was a nosebleed call at a golf course, and the patient, we transported the patient because she had to get her nose cauterized. And I was wrapping up our heart monitor cords, kneeling down, sanitizing our heart monitor. And the patient's husband was talking to my crew, and he fell on top of me. But he was like an obese gentleman, and his golf bag landed on my head. And all of a sudden, and I didn't see it coming because my back was to him. So all of a sudden, I'm just wrapping up the heart monitor cords. And the next minute, my neck is just like cranked. I got this huge bullet in my head, and my crew is trying to pull this gentleman off me, and I can just feel the lightning shooting down my arm. It was just intense, and it was very rapid. Went to my neurologist's office. I'm going to get some more Botox injections. I'm going to get some more epidurals. Like, I've been through this a few times. I'm in pain, but I can get through it. My neurologist was like, no, man, I told you when this happened, dystonia is permanent and progressive. This is not going to, like, we can put some band-aids on this, but this is going to get worse. And every time you have an injury, it just gets a little bit worse. And now you have neurological deficits. Like, there's no way you can work safely. I can get you a second opinion. I'm like, yes, give me a second opinion. So I go to this place called Barrows Neurology in Arizona. They're like this big time neurological facility. They say the exact same thing. Go to the fire department doctor. They say the same thing. So I went from like 3 months away, I was going to step into City Hall and get my official promotion to captain and my new badge. And around that same time period, I walked into City Hall and got my medical retirement. It was just very weird. And my family was preparing for this ceremony. For like, my kids are coming to work. They're going on ride-alongs. Daddy's the captain. And it's like, no, that ceremony is not happening. Neither is the job. Now I can't pick you up. I can't play with you anymore. Why is dad home? They're little. And now my grandma had passed away, and that was very hard on my grandmother passing away, my mom not recognizing my kids, and our dog dying was very hard on my children and me. It was really hard. And so the day I medically retired, they reviewed my documents. Every doctor was like, I didn't have a choice. I was driving home, and I was just crying. I was driving with my wife and I was so upset. And I didn't think I would grieve my career so hard, but I had stuff left to do on the job, and I was very off balance. Like I'm super emotionally aware now, but back then I wasn't. And I told my wife, like, I can't sit in this anymore. I'm so uncomfortable. Like I'm so uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm feeling, but I can't tolerate this. Let's go grab the kids and go to a movie. And she's like, what? You're a mess. And I'm like, I could just feel like I needed a dissociation or a distraction or something. So we scooped up the kids. We went to go see the Lego Ninjago movie. And this is the day that I medically retired. I'm in the theater, and one of my best friends from childhood's wife is repeatedly texting me, and I'm just still like, I'm so off balance. I feel like I'm in upside down land, and I'm kind of brushing her off. I'm telling her, hey, I can't talk right now. I'm going through some stuff. And I'm in this movie with my kids. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with my career and all this stuff. And she says, hey, Dan passed away. And that's one of my best friends on the planet. My best friends. He's the reason I had kids. I didn't want kids. And his little daughter fell in love with me when she was 3. And they used to do these Eskimo kisses, nose kisses, and they would go newsy, newsy, newsy. And she used to want to do newsies with me. And I do that with my kids now at this stage. And so like, this is like my best friend, my inspiration for having children. And he got hit and killed in a horrific car accident and like 10 hours before. And I learned about that the day that I was in a movie theater trying to disassociate from losing my career, which just a few weeks before I was trying to write a eulogy and share another death notification with my children. And throughout this time period, as this progressed, I couldn't even go to his funeral. It was very rough. I honestly, physiologically, it was like, I felt like I was in the twilight zone. Like I got dumped on my head. And I'm a strong, positive dude, but I just like, it was too much for me. And unfortunately the hits kept coming after that. So within a few short months, and pause me, by the way, this is a long story. I'm kind of getting towards the climax of it, but am I speaking too long, or do you want me to continue?
No, please. No, we want you to please keep going. And
Okay.
This is just, I mean, I can't even imagine all the things that you're sharing, Joe, and really appreciate your vulnerability right now. So please keep sharing. Wow.
Okay. Thank you for that. And so over the next several months, it was just trying to figure out how to pay the bills with half the income. Thank goodness we had been like Dave Ramsey'd up before that happened. So I had a savings account, was a little bit below my means, but 50% is not enough. I'm going to the vet oncologist, trying to save my dog, swiping the card. The card is getting maxed out. I can't make my friend's funeral. And I don't even know what I'm feeling, because I didn't even realize I wasn't one of these people who invested my whole identity in my career. I have a lot of friends and family outside of the job, and I'm a big personality. Some guys are just, their identity and their assignment are too enmeshed and intertwined. But I didn't realize how much I loved my job. A fire truck will drive by me and it'll trigger me into crying because I missed the fire truck, but I haven't cried since I was a kid. So I'm so confused. And during this time period, it just kept getting worse. My mother-in-law got a diagnosis of lung cancer and rapidly died. Both of my wife's grandparents died. And these are all my kids' grandparents and great grandparents too, and the dogs. And so my kids are 4 and 5 years old. I'm paying out of pocket money I don't have to hire a pediatric counselor to help us deliver these death notifications to my children. And I'm watching, my son was pretty little, but my daughter with the dogs and the grandma, like I'm watching her heart break over and over again as I sit at the table with her, to the point where finally we sit them down at, I don't remember which one, and they're like, who died? During that time period, that was like, I kind of summarized, but that was like a year. We had multiple deaths. I retired, my neck hurts, all this stuff. And my wife and I both were very, like, didn't know it, but we were unhealed and unemotionally aware from our childhood. And everybody has different coping mechanisms, and our life circumstances were really ugly. And she started drinking a lot. She started struggling with depression. It was hard for her. She lost both her grandparents, my job, our money, our dogs, everything, all the loss, and my kids, my daughter started, she was just like this, she was this well-adjusted 5-year-old just a year ago. And because of all the trauma and all the things we're experiencing, she lost it. And 5 or 6 years old, like, breaking property, harming her brother, biting, hissing, spitting, getting kicked out of school. She couldn't cope. And so we're like trying art therapy and play therapy and going to different kids counselors and grief work. And nothing is helping her. Every day, instead of going to physical therapy, I'm getting a call from the principal because she bit the teacher, and I'm going to pick her up, and my wife is drunk on the couch. And it's just like, and I don't have a job, and the bills are piling up. The fire department the union gave me a few $1,000s to pay for some medical costs. I've never asked for help in my life. Yes.
I just wanted to jump in because I can only imagine what your daughter must have been going through at 5 with very little coping tools. As Demisha and I are sitting here listening, I can't speak for her, but for me, you are a very open person. I can feel your energy. I can feel you reliving it. And I'm here just tearing up and holding you and your family up as you're sharing your story. So can you even imagine what a small child is going through internally with all of this? And when we can't cope, we'll find ways to cope that are often faulty and inappropriate and unhealthy. Yeah.
100% that. And you brought up a great point. I've done this a few times, like on my podcast and on some other interviews. I will be walking through it myself, and I'm equipped to do it, but I will start crying and I will be feeling the feels, and I'm safe doing that because of what you said at the beginning. I feel compelled and called to normalize this dialogue, and I know how to soothe myself afterwards. And trust me, I'll be journaling and meditating and taking a break when this interview is done, but it is going to get pretty emotional for me too, because I do walk through it. There's just no way not to. And yes, my poor little daughter, I watched her like go from stop smiling and then what's crazy is when she would come out of these incidences where she would do this, she's only 5 and 6 years old this time, intense shame, self-hatred. She would come out of this like fugue states, and then she would tell me that she wanted to die and she hated herself, and she's like 6. And I'm like, no, this is not your fault. You're perfect. It's okay. We're going to get through this together. And I'm learning. Sitting down with counselors and learning I'm learning about my feelings as we're teaching her how to label the emotions. We're going through the feelings wheel, how to name it to tame it, how to put a narrative. We're putting these like cutting out pictures of our dogs, and she gets to create a storyboard on when I learned that Bella had cancer and what it was like when she died. And I'm helping her give a voice to her story to process and doing all of these tools. Yes.
And what you had mentioned earlier in being a firefighter about taking care of yourself first and being self-full, and then giving. Our children and animals are so good at reading energy. And so the best thing that you can do is take care of yourself, continue your healing journey. It takes as long as it takes, but that energy that you and your wife create in the household will radiate out towards the children and continue providing that space for them to have a feeling. We often will want to jump in and say, oh, no, it's okay. But let them have the feeling, honor the feeling, validate their feeling, and they will heal in their own time. You have been through so much. And I believe, I have a higher power. I call him God. And I believe that saying, God never gives us more than we can handle. And then we are given these experiences that feel like they are bigger than we can handle, but it usually is for our bigger purpose. And so I kind of want to hear a little bit more about the other side and what you've been doing with that pain that has motivated you into this place of change and purpose.
There's no doubt about it that God put me through this 100%. And I kind of knew it at the time, but I didn't understand how. But the other side of it, which, by the way, you've hung through the roughest parts. I'm almost there. And then that is what is happening 100%. And like energetically, that was a big part of learning how to soften up and give them those calm mirror neurons, and how to regulate myself, because the best way to get my daughter regulated was not to tell her. It was to soften up and be a safe space for her to feel those feelings and put names to them, and even to be a safe space to be nasty and aggressive to. I was the person who wouldn't, allow. But also that was so hard when I was grieving myself. Like the counselor said, it's good to cry a little bit in front of them, show them like dad cries. It's safe to feel these feelings, like be you, but like don't lose your shit, because they're looking for security from you too. And that's what I tried to balance. So like when we would do our little ceremony, when we lost one of the dogs, I would speak some words and I would tell the kids, you're going to see me cry, and your dad is still a warrior. Warriors cry when they lose loved ones. I want you to feel safe to cry too. So I don't want you to be nervous or scared that I'm crying or like I'm hurting. I'm just showing you how it feels. The heart feels. And I never, here's the part. So I'm getting to the climax here. So I never wanted to end my life. I never wanted to exit. I think I'm conditioned to never tap out and never quit from the police academy and the fire academy. I never even thought that was an option. I was like, God, how do I hang in here? What tools? How do I get through today? How do I get through tomorrow to help my team? You know, how do I survive this? I'm going to get through this. And then one day I picked up my daughter from school because I miss physical therapy, which is the only place I can go get relief. I had just helped my dad because he calls me up. My mom is aggressive with him because she's so far gone with the dementia. She's running down Central Avenue trying to get in strangers' cars, causing a car accident. My neck hurts. I'm trying to help my dad with my mom. My mom is fighting me. I miss physical therapy. So I go pick up my daughter. My wife gets home, and because she's at this stage of the game unhealed, she's like screaming at me. And I don't know what happened, but a switch got flipped. And I temporarily, literally went insane. I was in a parking lot in my Toyota 4Runner, and I don't even recall how I got there. And it was an unfamiliar place to me. And I had my gun in my hand, and I had my finger on the trigger, and I was bringing the gun up to my mouth. And I feel like I can see my heart beating. It feels like somebody's hitting me in the chest with a sledgehammer. I've been meditating forever, but I can't catch my breath. I'm like hyperventilating. I feel like my head is in a vice. And I think I just hit a tipping point to where I could no longer sustain any more physical or emotional pain, and I needed out. And I felt like I didn't want to die. I was sobbing because it wasn't like, yeah, I need the easy way out. It was like, I don't want to do this, but I have to do this. I felt like my hands were on a stove and I had to pull them off. And I'm battling myself, and I'm bringing the gun up and I'm putting it down because it's like a weird, I don't even know how to explain how at odds with myself I was, like my survival instinct fighting the inability to endure. And I'm wrestling, and then the gun is in my mouth and I can still taste it. And it's not only in my mouth, but I'm starting to put pressure on the trigger, and I'm like, I have to do this. I'm feeling compelled and I don't want to do this. I can think about what I'm going to leave. And then I catch my breath, one breath. I've been trying so hard, and I get that breath, and I get the gun out of my mouth, and it was the weirdest. I can't even explain it, but it felt to me like the gun was the enemy. Like I put it, the glove box is open, I get it in the glove box, and I can't get away from it fast enough. Like I need away from it. And I fling myself out of my 4Runner, and I land on the ground, and it's like, boom. And now my neck is hurting even worse, but I'm alive, and the gun is away from me, and I roll over and I just start throwing up, like vomiting, like violently. And at this stage of the game, this is where I just start praying, like, help me. It was no pious, long-winded. It was like, I'm tapping out. God, I cannot do this anymore. And obviously you're calling me to do this, but I can't. And I collect myself, and I call my other firefighter friend, Brantley, and I tell him I just almost killed myself. Will you take my gun? And he's like, what? Yes, of course. But also, like, so I go to his house, and I'm hugging him and I'm crying. And I get home, and I don't exactly know what happened right away. A lot of this is like segmented out. And but essentially I shared what happened with my wife, and I told her I can't keep going like this, and I can't kill myself. And you can't keep drinking, and we're falling apart. Thank God she was receptive. She's like, I know we need to get the help we need. And she started researching, and she found an intensive outpatient facility that she was willing to check herself into. And we were just coming up on summer break. She's a teacher. So she was able to go, and she's so brave, and start walking through her trauma and getting the treatment that she needed. And it was intense. It was like 6 or 7 hours a day, meeting with a psychologist, holistic healing with yoga, doing EMDR, walking through trauma, addiction training. It was so intense. And it sucked for her because she really had to deconstruct a lot of very like abusive childhood things and really rough stuff and codependency issues to me that I didn't even know she had. And we were trying to relearn who we were because nobody taught us any of this. And we got together when we were 16, both just kind of latchkey kids got together and ran a million miles an hour into life. And then trauma hit us. And it was like, we're not equipped to handle this, even though we're pretty awesome and strong, you know. During those 2.5 months, almost 3 months that she was there, I didn't have any time or money to do my own therapy because she was there. We were tapped out. So I started reading every book I could sink my teeth into on post-traumatic growth and post-suicidal ideation growth. I signed up and paid for like meditation for chronic pain master classes. I was just like trying to do my own work. I got all these inner child journals. I was just open to it. And I would wake up before everybody and just write letters to my deceased loved ones and cry and write letters to my inner child and trying to like figure out, how do I build this resiliency? How do I become okay on my own? Now, I don't recommend doing that. That was just kind of the position I was in to do it on my own. And I was learning a lot. She would tell me what we would work through her stuff together, and I was learning what they were teaching her. She did a trauma egg. I kind of did my own trauma egg. And then I had the kids. And so all day while she was meeting with her outpatient and then her groups there, I'd wake up early, do all my healing stuff, and then I would try and curate a day with my children where we would have fun, because that's super important to be a kid, but also do work. Like my son was starting to get anxiety. We were doing anxiety workbooks. I found all these highly rated ones on Amazon from psychologists and counselors, and doing these workbooks with my kids, doing the stuff that the counselors taught us. And then I would do like yoga and meditation with them, but on YouTube there's all these like kid appropriate ones. Like my son could choose the Spider-Man yoga or whatever, you know. And we were like healing together for 3 months. And then my wife would come home, and it was hard for her, but she was evolving and healing too. And it wasn't linear. It was up and down. We had bad days and good days during this time, but like inch by inch, we started healing for sure. Like she got sober. She's still sober. This is like 5 or 6 years ago. She and I started learning conflict resolution and emotional vocabulary, and just building off all these tools that we had already learned from the kids therapists and these books. And I was just like a sponge. And then I started just kind of opening up. My wife and I started sharing. It started with our close circle. We had been like off the grid. We hadn't socializing. We lost some friendships because people were mad at us, because people put expectations on you when you're drowning and you can't go to a family party, you know what I mean? And your loved ones are talking shit about you. That's hard. And so reconciling that and learning our boundaries and just all of the things that are out there in the wellness ecosphere. And but like in 2021, one of the school counselors said, "Hey, have you ever talked to any of the treating physicians with Sophie about sensory processing disorder?" And I said, "No, what is that?" You know, and we've had so many diagnoses: ADD, ODD, just trauma and grief. Like everybody's telling us something different. The core thing that everybody told us was get as regulated as possible and keep as soothing an environment and an open, expressive, emotional environment as possible. Everybody said that, so we did that. But then we got a lot of conflicting opinions too. And the school psychiatrist or psychologist says, "Hey, we've noticed, we've been tracking some things. Every time she goes bananas is this kid dropped a lunch tray next to her. The fire alarm went off. There's all these loud noise things going on. This isn't my area of expertise, but you should look into this." And so while we were already healing and stuff, my wife was sober. I had been doing this, like we were incrementally getting better. We went to yet again another doctor for my daughter, and it was like, whoa, she met like 10 out of 10 of the criteria for these things. And almost always she would have her, like my little boy is hyperactive, so she would be violent towards him, but it's like he's in her ear chirping and it's so loud. And so we gave it a try, and we got her like earplugs, and got her these like socks, because it's very hard because she's socially not on a spectrum anywhere. Like when she's regulated, she doesn't fit into any like neurodiversity or any signs or anything, but we got her these socks and these without seams in them, and we started like really being balanced. Like when she says the shower water is too hot or cold, like I'm willing to take a minute and make sure it's just right. And oh my gosh, like as hard as it was, all the pain we went through, it was almost equally jarring how much she came back to herself when we started accommodating her. We got a 504 plan, and the school tells her before there's a fire alarm, and she gets to put her headphones on, and all of a sudden she's like normal again, and she's smiling and she's happy, and she's telling us thank you for these earplugs. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I missed this. And you were struggling, and I was making you regulate your emotions when it was like a neurological thing. She was working so hard on those books and stuff. But like now she's accommodated, and she's like at this stage of the story, she's 9 or 10, and she's like the most emotionally introspective, regulated 9 or 10-year-old, and she's feeling good. And there's been like 6 months since anybody died, which is like a crazy benchmark. But for us, it was huge because we had one like every month for a while. And now it's like 2021, and all of a sudden, like, I don't know, we're socializing again and we're watching movies as a family. My wife is sober. We check in and we talk about our feelings, and like it's all of a sudden we're like, we still have these wounds, but we're healthy, and my kids are playing again, and we're like taking little trips. We haven't been on a vacation in 3 years because we just couldn't, and we went on a cruise. And okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, Joe, thank you so much for sharing your story and for just being so open and vulnerable. And yes, the tears are part of our healing process. And what stood out to me is that you are comfortable sitting in the uncomfortable, leaning in. I talk with my clients often about they talk about, oh, I'm so afraid to feel my feelings. And that's exactly what we need to do. Identify our feelings, lean into our feelings. And when we lean into our feelings, they eventually will lighten. And you do the combination of sitting with your feelings and then having tools to be able to cope so that the pain isn't suffering. And then modeling that for your family. You and your wife are doing an incredible job. And I really hope that you're proud of the work you're doing and sharing this with all of the audience. And giving other people hope when they're in pain, when they are going through grief, when they are going through family dysfunction, or going through sorting out child struggles or diagnoses. So thank you for all of this, Joe. It means so much.
Well, thank you for saying that. I've done a lot of really cool stuff in my life, and I don't have a problem with pride. I'm not like awkwardly falsely humble, but like a lot of it is like I feel like I took advantage and capitalized off of awesome opportunities or gifts that God gave me. But I will tell you, I am proud of this. I've never been more proud of anything in my life. I feel called to nurture myself and my kids in a way that I never was able to, and I deserve to sit in these feelings and to process them and to have these tools. And I wish somebody would have given them to me, but nobody did. So thank God I had these resources, and I almost broke, and that led me to it. And my kids, I don't want to get too much into it, but like my daughter is going through hormonal things right now at 11 with, womanly things. She talks to me about it on the way to school. Like I feel so proud and privileged. She talks to me about the most uncomfortable things that I think I am proud, and I'm honored, and I'm grateful that my children are receptive. My kids, I'm such a safe space to share emotions for them. And honestly, nothing makes me more, I'm more proud of that than anything I've ever done in my life, even all the heroics and stuff.
Joe, oh my gosh. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I mean, between crying over here and listening to you, I just love that you're so open. And, Ali really hit it on the head, talking about, you just reliving, we're watching you relive it as you're telling it. And it still even feels raw in so many ways, but yet, you're healing by tearing up as well, and so I just appreciate you being, vulnerable and sharing, but also like modeling for your children and others in the community as well. Because, men in so many instances are taught not to feel their feelings, not to show their emotions, not to, and so many, it's like that is the lessons that we're taught. So you don't even have the tools on your tool belt to be able to cope with one death, let alone so many that you experience, and to really sit in your feelings. And so I just really love that you shared that today, but also I know that that's something that you're sharing, moving forward, and would love to talk about that transition. Like, after going through all of that, trauma, and then, working on your family, and you're still working on your family today, I know from what we shared. How did you begin to start a podcast and then become a meditation teacher? Like, that is just amazing. It's amazing.
I want to answer that question directly. Can I say one quick piece back to what Allie had said
Absolutely.
to me that really prompted me was in the very beginning of this conversation, you were talking about how we are all so similar as human beings, even though we're so unique and different, but like with emotions, I learned as much or more about these advanced emotional processing techniques from the books that I read about or with my children. And what Allie was just talking about, me sitting in my feelings, I learned like from Dr. Dan Siegel, who writes a lot of kid books, like you have to name it to tame it. So labeling emotions. I love these kid rhymes. I teach these to firemen. You have to feel it to heal it. There's no way out. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable and sitting in those feelings. And you can build that tolerance. It's a slow process, right? But it is like walking through fire, but the only way out is through. And what you resist persists. So if we ignore these things or we pretend they don't happen, or we're just like, no, I'm fine, that is going to fester and grow, and it will manifest, whether it's in just not being super happy, or whether it's in addiction, or whether you snap at your kids, or you're just not a safe space for your spouse, or whatever it is, you will internalize or externalize that. And so I just wanted to touch on those things because you said that you recognize that I do those things, Ali. I learned them from children, not children's books, but children's psychology books, but I use them for me. And because honestly, they apply, there's so wisdom in them for everybody. To answer your question back to how this shifted, well, as we started getting healthy, we at first it was just like sitting in our emotions. It was uncomfortable to share some of these things with our loved ones. And sometimes it was not received well, but that was intel that this isn't, with bless and release, we love them, but this isn't a person we're safe to be in a relationship with, because you kind of need some ride or dies who are with you. But the friends who are with us on it, or who accepted us back, we started opening up. And then it was like every once in a while I'd be telling the story self-conscious, and the fireman would start crying to me and telling me he had suicidal ideations, or my wife would be talking about her drinking, and all of a sudden one of her best friends is a closet alcoholic. And so my wife and I started going, there's some power in telling these things and just sharing. And it didn't start with the podcast or anything. It was more just like, how vulnerable and authentic, without being like weird over disclosures, can we be with ourselves and with other people? And just to not even share so much, but to share a tidbit and then to empathetically listen back to people. We started like changing some lives, and we weren't expecting it. Lots of phone calls with people crying to us or asking advice. And then we're like, there's something here like this. It wasn't just pain for purpose for us to heal, but like we were feeling compelled and called to use whatever our influence was. At that time, it was just friends and family and neighborhood. You go to a block party, you start talking about these taboo topics. There is an inherent craving for people. Some people are uncomfortable with it, but for the two that are uncomfortable, there's one person who's like, I would like to talk about this, and I don't know how, and thank you for opening that door. And I started getting phone calls from firefighters from other cities who I didn't even know, but like, so-and-so told me I could call you to talk to you about this. And then I had to learn a balancing act, because I had two people who were suicidal call me, and I'm not a therapist. I wasn't going to turn them away, and hopefully they don't shoot themselves, but I'm like on the phone. I'm like looking up resources and trying to be empathetic. That was very uncomfortable. I'm not a crisis care therapist. I'm not qualified for that. but that just shows you how big of a hole and a need there is for it, that this guy's willing to call a stranger. So then I started pooling together resources with some suicide prevention agencies. Like, what do I do when I'm in this situation and I'm out of my depths? How do I refer them to you, but also not brush them off? But also, what can I do with this? And so I got invited to speak at a couple different small fire department things. And I was like, I'm just going to start a podcast. I've always loved podcasting, and no dudes are out here talking about their emotions. I can't believe how many cops and firefighters are crying to me, or being aggressive with their kids, or the wives are talking to my wife. Like, let's just start sharing let's see what happens. And also, I had done The Artist Way. Have you ever heard of that book? That was kind of part of my self-healing. And I was like, I want to try a creative venture. I've never really been creative. So like, I love speaking. I love listening to podcasts. I just took myself to school, and that's how Grit, Growth, and Gratitude was born. I was like my gift to myself, to let myself be super authentic. I was not at the fire department. I didn't give a shit. I can talk about feelings. I can cry. I can cuss. I can say weird jokes. I can be silly. Like, this is me on the mic. Take it or leave it. And I'm going to share my journey. And that to get back to circling back to how the teaching the firefighters and the podcast was born, that's the evolution of how that started.
Wow, thank you so much, Joe. And you're like, I love that you created a space for yourself just to show up as your authentic self. One of our guests that we had on is an entrepreneur, and he talked about the importance of that in every area of your life. And I think, like, a lot of times we're in these roles, these jobs, spaces where we can't be our full authentic self. And the fact that you created that space for yourself is going to inspire others to do more. Tell me a little bit more about the podcast, and also the program that you created that focuses on suicide, PTSD, and addiction prevention for first responders.
Okay, so the podcast started out as, like, my intention behind every episode was to share, even if it was very embarrassing, like when I used to have anger problems and I was 19 and my wife and I were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. I screamed at her and I punched holes in walls, and it scared her. And I'm mortified saying that because I don't even lose my cool anymore. But I'm going to tell you guys the story. And this is how I went to the public library, and I learned from John Kabat-Zinn in a mindfulness book how to label my anger. That's anger and all this stuff. So, like, every episode I designed with, like, I'm going to be creative, I'm going to share authentically, and I'm going to give some sort of tool that I wish I would have had, that I hope can help somebody else who's in my position. Whether it's a lot of women listen to my podcast, but I kind of have the firefighters in mind, or the children of the firefighters. But it's been a pretty broad, eclectic mix of people, because this is universal stuff, and but like, I speak in a lot of analogies and vernacular from public safety. I cuss, and I use different, like I said, instead of the oxygen mask on the airplane, I use the air tank on the fire truck and all that. There's a lot of applicable lessons, and so every episode, like I've done 12 episodes, was like, I'm going to share a story where I'm being raw and showing you that it's no place of judgment. I didn't know any better either. And then the tools that led me there, and then some sort of fun, applicable, easy to remember way. And so I got through, like, processing anger. I wrote an expressive, I taught expressive letter writing on one of the episodes. And I wrote a letter to my mom, and I read it on the podcast, and I cried. And I said, listen, this is going to be super vulnerable and uncomfortable for me, but you guys, we have these feelings. I want to model for you how to do this. And, it's not easy for a firefighter to do that, but, like, it was like, hey, Mom, I miss you. And I looked at Sophie today on the way to school, and she looks just like you. And and I started crying and talking through, but, like, I read a letter, and, like, it was like, this is how I do this. I hope it works for you. And also, here's some caveats, here's some resources, real mental health resources, and make sure, in conjunction with therapy, and do a loving kindness meditation afterwards and calm your nervous system. But anyways, it was like, almost, I built a curriculum by accident, because I was trying to tackle these tools: grief, anger, coping with a traumatic call, conflict resolution. Instead of attacking your spouse, like, I created this card system, right? And it was like, I did this, I created it, but my wife loved it, so we use it together, and we look at conflicts as cards. And so I love analogies. And so we don't stack up cards, because that's resentment. We play one card at a time. And we ask each other, shoot her a quick text message. something bothered me. When is a good time to play a card? So we don't ambush each other with cards, and we don't go tit for tat with cards. We're not playing a game of cards against each other. We're each playing one card together because conflict is to bridge, right? And we say things like, I learned this from her outpatient. When you said or did this, I felt like this. We just share how we felt, not to attack the other person. And then we empathetically listen. And so I did episodes on that, like how to do this. And all of a sudden these people are like really being responsive to it. And it's helping marriages and stuff. And so I recently, I got invited by one of my fire chiefs to go to coffee, and I really didn't want to go. I had a lot going on, and he's like, hey, we got a retirement badge for you. We just got these new retirement badges. They're super dope. And I was like, Chief, this is awesome, but can you mail it to me? I'm so busy. And he's like, I really would like to see you. Can you come out? So I kind of felt that green light nudge to go. So I went and I met him for coffee. And he's like, hey, a lot of the guys are using your materials, your ebook, your meditations, your podcast. We would like it if you would come speak to the fire department and like do a big talk, bigger than we've done, like police, fire, chiefs. We're going to film it. And I was thinking, like, that same week, another member of my department, he told me he's checking himself into an outpatient rehab facility. He's been struggling with addiction. His marriage is on the rocks. And he said, hey, when you shared your story with me 2 years ago, I've been trying to ask for help for 2 years, and I finally just did. And I'm still probably going to get a divorce and everything is a mess, but it was finally your voice that was loud enough. I was like sobbing when he was telling me this, because I was just sharing my story with him 2 years ago. He's my friend. He took me to lunch. And I was just sharing with him. It turns out he was hurting at that time, and my voice was finally loud enough. And he was like, why don't we have prevention on this, Joe? Like, what? And I said, I don't know. Like, we are finally catching up. We have reactive mental health care in the fire service. Like, we have crisis care. We're developing programs with therapists, but there's barriers because the guys don't know they need help. They don't want to ask for help. They don't know very basic emotional coping strategies, like the stuff that I teach, like from a very, very 101 basic level, like how to feel your feelings, the feelings wheel, all this stuff in the podcast. And prevention is the cure. Like in 99%, like in the fire department, you want a smoke detector and a good sprinkler system or a good alarm system before the fire department gets there and has to put the fire department out and the sprinklers are there. And we are all about readiness, preparedness, and prevention. Cardiac disease, we stay in shape, we eat clean. You want a good doctor, right? Like, you need therapists, of course. But you don't want to get to surgery or have diabetes. You want to like walk around the block and eat clean. And so I started repurposing the podcast and using everything that I learned about doing these fun Instagram videos, like how to create a hook, how to, be efficient with my words. And I created a curriculum for like PTSD, suicide, and depression prevention. Like, and it also collaborated. I've compiled the resources for if you get there. And then in between, like, we have a lot of guys who are maybe not addicted, but they're dependent. So I was lucky. Like, I've made so many cool friends on Instagram. One of them was an addiction specialist. She helped me create questions that I could ask in the video to the firefighters and the police officers watching. Like, hey, if you think you're just a weekend binge drinker, you just smoke a little bit of weed, that's okay. But like, ask yourself these questions. And if you say yes to any of them, you might be struggling with dependency, or ask your spouse these questions if you're comfortable with it. And also, if so, here's the resources of what to do. And so it just broke down like every little element that I was like, why wasn't I given any of these skills? Are you kidding me? You're pulling me out of the fire academy, police academy at 21 years old, making me do CPR on babies, people's skin sloughing off. We're all getting divorced. And 85% of first responders struggle with mental health issues. 45% have dangerous, high risk drug and alcohol use. And we are more likely to die. I learned this. We're more likely to die by suicide than any other event right now. There's a call to action from the CDC, and we're doing nothing about it. We train on every stupid scenario, like roof collapse. Not that that's stupid, but I've been a firefighter a long time. I never had a roof fall in on me, but we have so many suicides left and right. And so I'm like, they're inviting me, they're asking me, they're talking about prevention. I know my role. I'm not a therapist, but I'm going to just talk about the very 101 basic level stuff from a first responder to a first responder. I teamed up with my friend who is a psychologist who runs a mental health agency. He kind of overviewed it all, made sure everything was evidence-based, and, helped me out with it so it has some credibility. So it's my grit, growth, and gratitude in conjunction with Alleviate Mental Health. And It hasn't even really launched yet. It just got developed. I'm going next month to speak at that big symposium I was telling you about. And they're probably going to, my department's probably going to implement it as mandatory training. I created meditation specifically for first responders, some nervous system regulation meditations, an anger meditation where if you're feeling like you're temperamental, put this meditation on, go somewhere safe, go in the fire truck and close the doors. Can I swear on here, by the way, or is that
Absolutely.
give an authentic voice to your anger? Fuck being a dad. I hate my kids. Okay, no, you don't, but you have to feel it to heal it. That is like your raw inner child anger voice. And I walk the guys. I hate my job. I hate being a fucking firefighter. I hate the chief. You don't. You're grateful to have the job. You love your pension, but that both are true. And you need to give a voice to that. And different, like I created these exercises and these methods that help me that are in our language. And all of our training is done through video, except for the hands-on stuff. So it's most likely going to be, they're going to make it mandatory for the guys to do, because these are perishable skills annually, to watch these videos and learn these skills. I'm making it free for the families and the retarees. And I'm just putting all the information out there, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I can tell you, even just planting the seed, so many, it's just great. Because 5 years ago when I started this, the message was, I had to push it. Now I'm being asked for it. Everybody's hurting and everybody knows it. And I happen to think I went through everything I went through to be at this moment that I'm at right now. And I am damn determined to be a change agent in the culture. And these kids don't need to have addicted fathers who kill themselves, or these spouses come home, these firefighters, these youngsters that come out of the fire academy. They need to be equipped, just like we're prepared physically. They need to be prepared with emotional and mental fitness too. And nobody's doing it. And so I'm shooting for the moon on it. I'm swinging for the fences.
No, Joe, first of all, sharing your stories, and this is a large reason why Allie and I wanted to start this podcast. It is so powerful sharing our stories and really our pain, the pain of our stories and the things that we had to overcome. That is what inspires, change in others too, and your pain to purpose has just been such a remarkable journey. I love all the things that you're doing around depression and PTSD and suicide prevention. I think every police department, every fire, department should have this. And if they don't, they should tap into you immediately, because I can't even imagine both of those jobs where you're risking your life, seeing just the most incredible things that most humans would never, ever see in their lives. And you can't even prepare yourself for that. I cannot imagine to not have any kind of, tools on your tool belt to help you through that. I just, so the fact that you're doing that and, have the crisis care and coping strategies, like just helping people with all of these things, even feeling their feelings, putting a name to their feelings. And the thing that you and your wife do, I just had to call that out because I'm going to actually start using that with my children. I love the card. I love analogies. I use analogies with my clients. I'm a certified coach. And but I love the card analogy. That is so good, like playing one card at a time, and then even asking, like, is this a good time, to play this card? So great. I'm stealing it.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I was just going to say, isn't hindsight 2020? We don't want to be going through that pain. And once we've gone through it, we recognize the reason for it. And all three of us, I can say, have gone through our journeys to be in a position to be of service to other people.